Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, tonight we're going to be continuing with our series of shiring, tasting the future and the present. And after a hiatus of sorts or a break because of the Yamim Tovim and because of human error, we're here now and we're going to get started. Be'ezras Hashem. There's a famous teaching from the Rebbe of Bunim, the pharmacist tzaddik, pharmacist turned Rebbe of the Kutzker Rebbe, Talmud of the Yira Kadosh, that in the tefillah of Yishtabach, we say, Haboicher b'shirei zimra, that Ribono Shel Olam HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses shirei zimra, he chooses to listen to those songs, those musical songs of praise. And Rav Simcha Bunim, in a way that only Rav Simcha Bunim could, he read this pasuk differently, he read this verse differently, he read this part of the tefillah differently. Haboicher b'shirei zimra doesn't mean he who chooses to listen to the songs of praise, but shirei is also the lashon of shirayim, of leftovers, of crumbs, of that which remains after something that was present is now gone, that which is left by the wayside, that remains afterwards, the shirayim. And haboicher b'shirei zimra means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is HaKadosh Baruch Hu who chooses to listen to the songs that are left over, the leftover of songs. And what is this leftover of song? What is this remnant of a praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a remnant of presence, a remnant of Yishuv Hadas? It's the fact that in Cheshvan, in the month of Cheshvan, after the Yomim Noraim, after Elul, after Slichos, after Rosh Hashanah, after Yom Kippurim, after the days between Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and Sukkot, Hoshana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, after all of the dibur, after all of the speaking and the singing and the praising and the screaming and the yelling, all that is left over is the marcheshes of the svasayim, the murmuring, the rechishin of the lips, the quivering of the mouth that is no longer saying anything, but is still in the motions of speaking, but there's nothing left to say. Everything has been said, everything that could be said has been said, or we feel that we've expressed all of our kochos of dibur. And we come to Cheshvan, and it's a time of rechisha sasvasayim, it's a time of the murmuring of the lips. There's nothing left. It's a month of quiet, of chash, of cheshvan, chash, the silence that follows the noise, the dust that settles after everybody who is present leaves. And the month of Mar Cheshvan, the month of Cheshvan, is a month of the murmuring of the lips. It's the memory, it's the entrance into a past experience of the song and praise that we experienced in the Yom Noraim. And it's being present when the words are no longer there, or when a person feels that all of the words that I said have not quite hit the point that I wanted them to say. That which remains after speech is finished. That's the month of Mar Cheshvan. That's where the bitterness of Cheshvan comes from. The bitterness of Cheshvan, the merirus of Cheshvan, comes from the fact that a person can no longer speak. Nafshi yatsa b'diburo, when I'm able to speak, when I'm able to communicate, when I'm able to convey what lives in the inside of my own most experience, in my heart, and all of the levels of my soul, when I can share it with the world, when I can share it with the Ribono Shel Olam, when I can share it with a friend or another person, those diburim, there's a relief. When there's worry in the heart of man, when there's the claustrophobia of that neurotic kernel that rests in the heart of all of us, that place of merirus, the salt of life, there's a place that remains after everything has been said. And we can no longer express, we can no longer be mafig that tsar, we can no longer utilize language to alleviate that burden. We can no longer sing out to the Ribono Shel Olam sometimes. There's no more words, there's no more yamim tovim. It's a return into the mundanity, into the grayness, the silent bitterness of a month like Cheshvan, where dibur falls away. There's an ilimus that falls upon the person. There's a death of speech on a certain level. Like we spoke about in the shirim of trauma, there's an absence of speech. And typically speaking, we see speech as an ideal. We see communication as an ideal. We see sharing our experience and conveying our ideas and connecting to the things around us and connecting to ourselves and connecting to the books and all of the holy things in our lives. That's representative of speech. That's a state of dibor. That's a state of kichui machem devarim v'shuvu al Hashem, of utilizing the essential strength of what it means to be a human being, which is the capacity to convey ideas through language. And we see speech as an ideal. We transform speech into a pekadosh, into guarding ourselves from speaking things that are negative, a negative language, negative impressions, resentment-based speech, lashon hara. And we transform our speech into a mila tova. We transform it. We're mahapechet. We sing out to Rabbanu Shloim. We talk in Torah. We talk in Emunah. We talk in bitachon. Even when we don't, we're still talking in bitachon. So we see speech as an ideal. Speech is the mark of being human. It is the birthplace of Adam Harishon's encounter with this world. And so we typically idealize speech. We see speech as a level that is above an original immature silence, the silence of immaturity that begins with the birth of the individual and the stuttering and the babbling, which is the absence of speech. It's the negation of speech. It's baby talk. That poking a hole at the whole edifice of language, the mockery of language, showing that it's nothing but a construct of sounds, that silence we deem as being something unhealthy, something sad, something broken, something animalistic, something that has not yet reached its stage of maturation in the expression of speech. We see silence as having nothing to say. We see silence as having no willingness to speak or no desire to speak, or we see the person who's showtake as a person who is not trying to say or share or impart their selves on reality. And we see silence as a stage of katnus, as a maturity, and we see dibor as a state of godless, as maturity. We see this in the word chashmal, itim chashos, itim emalos. There are times of silence and there are times of speech. Speech follows silence. There's so many points that point to this very nekuda, that speech is the maturation of the self, and we know nafshi yatsa b'dibura, that is the goal. The goal is to speak. And so we'll see the silence of Mar Cheshvan as something negative. We'll see the silence of Mar Cheshvan as a descent into the void of silence, as a descent into the void of meaning making, leaving the sukkah, leaving the shades of faith, leaving our bitachon and our amun and HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a revealed way, falling a little bit deeper into our shadow that we dealt with on Hoshana Rabbah. And we see this descent into silence as a hibernation of the self of sorts, matim to the chorev zman, which is related to femininity and a silent modesty, where a person is moved inwards within themselves, no longer expressing themselves due to some weakness or fear. And we assume that it's the dark days of the winter months that bring about the death-bringing silence that takes speech away from us, where all that is left is the quivering of our lips. The shirayim, the leftovers, when after everything has been said and done, I still feel that nekuda of difficulty within my heart. I still don't believe enough in myself, in the Rabbanu Shloim. I still haven't reached what I want to reach. And we see this shtika, we see this descent into shtika as a negative thing, as a natural descent away from the or of the Yerach HaEsanim. But be'emes, there's something about silence that not only precedes speech, but also follows speech. All of our tzaddikim speak of three levels, that there's a level of ignorance prior to knowledge, there's a level of silence prior to speech. And that immature stage is a silence that is rooted in the symptom of not having anything important to say, or speaking with importance rather, because the power of speech is not about the content of what is said, but the context through which it is said. It's independent of any marked signified concept. It's just a signifier of significance. The silence that we experience in Cheshvan is a silence that transcends speech. It's the silence that I encounter when I come to that place where I recognize that in the end of the day, what I'm trying to truly say can't be said in words. In the end of the day, what I'm truly trying to encounter in my life, Rabbanu Shalom, what I'm trying to feel, what I'm trying to bring into my own most reality, to live with this idea, to live with the emunah and the bitachon, that in the end of the day, the words don't reach where they need to reach. The words don't reach where they need to reach. And in the absence of the right word, in the absence of the ability for the word to hit the precise point in which we so desire it to hit, to have the perfect word, to say what we need to say to our loved ones, to ourselves, to the Rabbeinu Shalom, to Metzius. When we realize that language is no longer a vessel that we can use, we come to a new level of shtika, we come to a new level of silence. A silence that is not prior to speech due to ignorance, but after speech due to the lofty nature of what I'm trying to convey, of what I'm trying to say, of what I'm trying to do in this world, of what a person is trying to do every second that we encounter reality. And this shtika is not a shtika because I don't have the words, I'm not intelligent enough to express this to my loved one, to that person, to my boss, whatever the significant application of the idea is. It's not a silence due to a lack of speech. It's a silence that transcends speech. It's a silence that transcends speech in the sense that the only way to describe what it is that we're trying to do in this world, Rabbeinu Shalom, what we're trying to do when we try and connect to you, when we try and daven, is in the end of the day to come to the place where we realize that I can't say it in words. It's beyond words. It's something that language can't describe because it's so internal, it's so inner. It's so precious, it's so individualized, it's so subjective, it's so real in accordance with each and every person's own most experience, in accordance with the point of one's heart as it exists in that very moment, that it's such a precise point, the Evan Hashasiyah, the dot in the middle of the bays, that represents that quintessence of our experience, it can only be conveyed by way of silence. A silence that doesn't negate the value of speech, but moves through and beyond speech. A silence that has the power of language, a silence of knowing that there's infinite words in the world that can be said, but none of them can come close to the Nekuda Pnimis. The only thing that comes close to the Nekuda Pnimis is shtika, is silence. It's the Shatik Rav, as the Mittler Rebbe describes, and the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh describes, and all of the tzaddikim of Chabad, the Shatik Rav, the silence of Rav, in the face of a truth that is so deep that language would have been an embarrassing tool to use in relationship to it. The truth that he received from his Rebbe, the svara that he understood at that point, was so clear that to try and verbalize agreement to it or verbalize it would to cheapen it, would to make it something capturable in language. But the inner experience of that Nakuda for Rav, for a Talmud, for somebody who's encountering what it means to live with Amunah in each and every moment, that shtika is not because of a lack of language. It's because that shtika contains more than language could ever possibly contain. Shatik Rav, he lived in a place of silence, not because he didn't have the words to say, but because it was no longer about languages, it was about the quietude, the inner silence of oneself when they close their eyes for a second. In the winter months where it's a little bit dark outside, where it's less pirsum, where it's less externalization. And a person can sit silently and draw down the concealed light, the Or Haganuz, by sitting silently with the self. This finds its culmination specifically by Hanukkah, where a person sits silently and listens to the song of the candles. The month of Hanukkah associated with Rachel, who chose silence as her tool. And this silence of Shatik Rav, the Vilna Gaon, as he tried to embark on his mission, the mission of Mashiach ben Yosef, to make it to Eretz Yisrael, to conquer the land of Eretz Yisrael from the hand of the Canaanim. The Vilna Gaon, in the letter, the Igeres Hagra that he left aside for his family, it says as follows, that Kol Rega Sha'adam Saitim Es Piv Zoiche Litam Tam Or Haganus, that every moment that a person merits to close their mouth, they merit to taste the concealed light. Now, is that because a person doesn't have anything to say, that I shouldn't try and experience everything through language? No, chas v'shalom, language is the kli through which the osios and the oros of HaKadosh Baruch Hu come into our lives, through Torah, Tefillah, Dveikus, Yichudim. But the goal of language is to take us to a place of silence, to a place of shtika, to a place of shtika kahoda'ah, a silent place that is so deep that I can taste the Or Haganus. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, and he has numerous Torahs where he associates shtika with the level of keser, with the level of reishad lo asyada, with the level of tznius, of a modesty of silence. A silence of l'chad dumya tehila, my silence is praise for you, Rabbanu Shloim. Every pulsation of every cellular expression of my existence is praise to you. specifically in the silence, where it's no longer about projection, it's no longer about an attempt to conquer, but rather it's an attempt to live with a calmness that exists within our minds at every moment that we choose to be silent. Every moment that we realize that Rebbeinu Shalom, I can say all the words and I'll continue to say all the words, and we all have to say all the words, and each and every person comes into this world to say all the words. But ultimately, with all that is said and all that is expressed, as Rav Hutner points out throughout his hundreds of ma'amarim, the power of dibur and the power of shtika that follows dibur. That the shtika is the culmination of speech. It's the chash, it's the quiet that follows everything being said. Dr. Binachman al yedei hashtika yizka lebitachon in Sefer Amidos. And when a person lives with that silence, when a person is quiet in that moment, they experience bitachon. A person learns how to trust. If a person is speaking all the time, a person is trying to convey, sell, then a person is hanging themselves, is dependent upon the external response to the words spoken, to my expression outwards. The midah of bitachon, which is the silent certainty that alts is git, that everything is good, bein kach u bein kach, everything is good, that is only encountered and lived with through the kli of shtika. Dr. Binachman in Os Beis in Sefer Amidos, ayidei hashtika nimta kadin, that through silence, when I learn to silence myself, when I learn to live with silence, and again, we're going to see silence is not a contradistinction to speech. A person speaks through silence. It's not about being quiet. It's about learning to speak lowly, to lower our voices a little bit, to make a little bit less of a fuss. When a person is silent, they're mamtik the din, because when I'm looking at the external world, ulai, all of this is b'derech efshar on Rabbeinu Sefer Amidos. When I'm living my externalized life and I'm tole and I look at every encounter in my life and every situation of my life as being the cause of my inner experience, then there's infinite things to blame. People, places, things. There's an innumerable list. And those are dinim. The dinim are the encounters, those negative things that I encounter in my life, where the Ribono Shel Olam is telling me that there's something that needs to be worked out here. But through silence, nimta kadin, I sweeten the din. I live in that place. I enter into that place where there's no more dinim, because I understand that everything comes from the Ribono Shel Olam. Dr. Binachman in Ois Gimel and Sefer Amidos, emuna ba al yedei shtika. So here Rabbeinu is hinting to us the two levels of silence. First and foremost, through silence you come to bitachon. But how do you come to emuna, which is the key, the birthplace of bitachon? That's through silence. So silence both precedes and follows the encounter with truth. Because when we're speaking and when we're not speaking, what we're trying to do is silence ourselves a little bit more, be a little bit more humble. Realize that we don't have the perfect word to say. Realize that it's not dependent on our efforts. Emuna comes through silence. Dr. Binachman and Oisdalid, Kishanoifel is a kushya al Hashem Yisparach. When a person encounters some difficulty, some question on the Ribono Shel Olam in their lives, after Yom Kippur, after Rosh Hashanah, after Elul, after Sukkot, after all of the avodah, all of the demyonos, all of the hiskashrus and the davening and the oiros and the busyness, in the end, the person still has a kushya on the Ribono Shel Olam. It's cheshvan and it's mar, it's bitter. The person, when there's a question that descends onto a person with regards to the way Hashem Yisparach is revealing himself in this world, azai tishtok, be silent. And through the shtika, and through the silence, your very thoughts themselves are going to give you the answer that you need to the question, because the answer is always there. But the noise of speech and the noise of the speech of the mind is so babbling and so ever-present that it blocks us from the answer, and it gives us a feeling of a kushya. But through silence, says Rabbeinu in Osdalid of Sefer Amidos Erech HaShtika, through silence itself, that's the way the person is going to find the answer. This is a Mefurish Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh in Keser Shem Tov, in Ois Reish Chaf Hey. Siyag l'chachma shtika, a gate, say Chazal, to Chachma, something above Chachma, Siyag, the Keser, that silent encounter with the Rebbeinu Shleilim, in my innermost desire that need not be expressed in order to be real, because it exists within me, and that's the only truth I need. Zok the Baal Shem Tov, Kishehu b'shtika, when a person is silent, Yachuhu ledavek atzma ba'olam ha'machshava shu Chachma. When a person encounters silence, at that point you're able to connect yourself to thought. You're able to be mamtik the dinim. You're able to find the Rebbeinu Shleilim. And this shtika of cheshvan, this quiet of cheshvan, this quiet that some tzaddikim carried themselves with, this quiet is the avoid of cheshvan. It's the chash. The Mittler Rebbe used to say over Torah, and everybody was silent. But before the Mittler Rebbe would give over Torah, he would be heard saying shah, 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 shah. The tzaddikim say nobody was talking, so who was he shying? Zot the tzaddikim that he was shying his thoughts, he was quieting down the zerem, the flow of Rechovas Anar, of the noise, of the thoughts and the speech, and he was silencing them to be able to sit with shtika for a second. L'chadumya tehila, that my silence is praise to you, Rebbeinu Shleilim. My silence, my willingness to be mevatel myself, my willingness to not be heard all the time, my willingness to not be right all the time. That's where the tehillah comes from. Shtika kahoda. Silence is praise. Because the only way to praise the Rebbeinu Shleilim, who's so far beyond any possible description or limiting term, is only through silence. Shtika is the only way to express that which is most true, because if I'm saying it, it's not true. As Rav Kook says so many places, that the birth of language is the birth of the duplicitous nature of what it means to be a human being. That there's always the possibility of saying a true word and it's not saying a true word. It's the birthplace of Sheker and Emes. Says Rav Kook, says Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, in Oiros HaKodesh, Chelek Gimel, Daf Reish Ayin Gimel. Yisra and Hashtika, the elevated nature of Shtika, V'ruach HaKodesh, HaMeschaber Al Yada, and the inner experience of Ruach HaKodesh on each and every person's individualized level that is connected and associated with it. Ba mitoicha hispartzus hapnimis. It emerges by way of this expansion, this poiritz geder, that is experienced internally. It's not an external expression. It's an explosion of self in an inward, quiet way. It emerges from where? It emerges from the flowing stream of the soul. That it stems from the irrigating flow of the soul that seeks to only express itself. Always expression, expression, expression. It won't tolerate anything that blocks it. And this is this inner dialogue, the silence of external speech for an inner dialogue of hisboidedus penimis, of not needing to use externalized language, but being silent at the depth of language, is very important. And it demands that there be no prevention that stands against it in the world. When you silence everything out, that's when the inner silence becomes something that is rooted and expressive of the inner depth. The or haruchani, and the light of spirituality, pe'er hachayim v'guroisam hayisoidis miskabrim v'hoichem. And the spiritual light of life, the pe'er hachayim, the beautification of life, and its strength and its expressivity that rests at the foundation of existence, strengthen itself and it moves forward. And at this point, dibur is now already a botherance. It's a hindrance that's built on that which is rooted in that which was old, that which I could understand. If I could say it, I could understand it. From that which is already metushtash, confused and mixed up, and in the process of darkening. It's limited. If I could say it, it's limited. The birth of shtika after all of the dibor, cheshvan after all of the yomim naraim, the avoida is to reach a level above the yomim naraim. That could only be expressed by way of shtika, of shatik rav. The dibor is rooted in the past constriction. V'noten ala zerem ha'ma'ayani hashokek lechidush v'tiryos chadashos. It serves as a prevention to that natural flow of the Mayan Haneshama that is perpetually seeking to move forward. It's perpetually seeking to move forward. Ashtika nitva'a ba'omek haneshama. The silence is rooted in the depth of the soul. Zoisi demama ha'elyona. This is the elevated silence. Kol demama daka. The avoid of Mar Cheshvan is to be mamshech all of that which we tried to gain in our lives during the Yamim Noraim. All of the noise, all of the hasaga, all of the attempts to own something, to grab something, to hold on to something, to have something legitimate that I can express as having earned or gained from such a halig time period. And very often we look at ourselves in Cheshvan and all we can say is the Mar Cheshvan. It's bitter because it's silent now. I don't have anything. I don't remember the vacation. I don't remember this. I don't have anything to show. But the Eitzah is to be silent, to learn that a person doesn't need to say anything in order to have everything to say. The neshama is tamin mispalelas. The neshama is always saying what it needs to say to the Rebbeinu Shalom in its shtika and its dibur. But the shtika that we allow for ourselves to be present in our lives, the realization that I don't have to always say everything. I don't have to always be the center. I don't have to always be right. I don't have to always be the one in control. I can be silent. I can stop trying to express my desire on reality, and I can accept reality a little bit more. That avoid of Mar Cheshvan is the avoid that leads us to the silent kedusha of Hanukkah. It leads us to the silent oros of la'asid lava, where a person no longer has to speak in order to understand. They're always going to be in the world of machshava on a certain level, relative to the level that they just ascended, relative to the level that we have yet to ascend. We're obviously still in the stage of immature speech because it's infinite. There's silence and speech and silence and speech and silence and speech, and every moment calls for different expressions of it. But the avoid of Cheshvan is to chash, is to be silent, is to feel the murmuring of the lips and to believe the fact that even when I'm not speaking, I'm speaking. Even when I'm not praising every aspect, I'm l'chadumya tehila Rebbeinu Shalom. You're present everywhere. To speak about you sometimes is to imply that there's even room to speak about you. You're everything. And in that shtika, a person learns how to be moide to the Rebbeinu Shalom, the shorish of hod, the shorish of silence, the shorish of that darkness that descends, which brings about the hoda'ah of Chanukah be'ezras Hashem.